Parkinson's and is doing triathlons and marathons at a level far beyond what I could imagine. And all of this is after being diagnosed with Parkinson's. And I have to say, Sarah, that I think you're better today than the first day that I met you. And these are years later and with Parkinson's disease. So she has lived well with Parkinson's, and I want you to understand that while everybody may be different, that you too can also live well in your own way with Parkinson's. So I'm going to have her come up and talk, and then each of our panelists will be introduced in sequence and give you a richer story. Sarah?
Thank you, Dr. Walter. So I'm Dr. Whittingham. I'm a physician, a triathlete, an anesthesiologist, a veteran, and in 2020, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 46. Earlier that year, our family had moved from Salt Lake City to Cleveland right before COVID. And by July 4th of 2020, things were starting to get back to normal, so we decided our big first family outing would be to the grocery store. And we went to the Giant Eagle, and as we were walking into Giant Eagle, a man was walking out with a Low to Jaw t-shirt on. And unless you're from Utah and a cyclist, you would have no idea what Low to Jaw is, but it's a very competitive 200-mile bike race in Utah. And we were new to the area looking for a place to bike, and so we stopped and talked to this man and said, "Hey, have you done Low to Jaw? Do you know what this is?" And he said yes, and we kind of chatted for a while. He said he worked for Cleveland Clinic, and we got his name, and I said, "Well, I just started working for Cleveland Clinic. I can find you on the Global," and I wrote his name down in my phone and set it aside. 4 months later, in November of 2020, I was sitting on the couch one evening with my family, and I noticed a tremor in my arm, and I was subsequently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. During my first visit with Dr. Walter, he gave me a list of research studies and told me that a lot of people benefit and feel they have value in participating in research studies. At the time, I was completely overwhelmed. I spent a period of time in denial. I ended up suffering from anxiety and depression. I ended up gaining 30 pounds that first year, and I was really struggling. And somehow I came across this handout months later that Dr. Walter had given me. And I started looking at it, and there was a study having to do with cycling and its progression of Parkinson's disease. And I thought to myself, wow, I used to like to cycle. I was pretty good at it. Maybe I'll look into that. And I saw that the lead investigator was this Dr. Jay Alberts. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, well, how do I know this name? How do I know Jay Albert's name? And so I Googled it, and I looked at the picture. I was like, oh my gosh, this is that guy that I ran into at the grocery store 4 months before I was even diagnosed. So I think there was probably some sort of divine intervention that set me on this path, led me on a positive trajectory that ended up getting me to the finish line at Ironman Hawaii. So I ended up enrolling in Dr. Albert's study. At first, it was difficult to even ride the bike for 20 minutes at a time. His physical therapist, one of the study coordinators, would call me periodically and tell me I needed to be trying to ride more. But within a couple months, I noticed that the more that I rode the bike, the better I felt. And so I began to ride more and more. And my husband had signed up to do a triathlon in July of 2022 in Sandusky, Ohio. And it was a half Ironman triathlon, so that would have been a 1.2-mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a 13-mile run. And when he had signed up, I thought there was no way I could even think of possibly accomplishing that. But as I began to ride the bike more, it crossed my mind that, hey, if I can ride the bike for an hour, I can probably ride the bike for 3 hours, which means I could probably get to the finish line. I might not be pretty, but I could probably get to the finish line. So I signed up for the race, and I started training. And I didn't tell anybody right away because I was kind of doubting myself that I could even do this. But the more I trained, again, the better I began to feel. And so I set the goal to beat 6 hours. And on the day of the race, everything went perfectly. I felt amazing. And I not only beat 6 hours, but I also ended up beating my husband. But he beat me again at the most recent race, so he's taken over the title again. But so I no longer have bragging rights there, but I did for a little bit. Later that year, because of that race, I qualified for the Half Ironman World Championships, which went really well. And every year, Ironman Hawaii, which is the premier event in all of triathlon, is a very difficult race to get into. They make a documentary about the race each year. And every year, it's kind of like the Super Bowl of triathlon. It's something I look forward to watching every year. And in 2022, they always focus on an inspirational athlete, somebody who's overcome adversity as part of the documentary. And in 2022, they focused on Chris Niggich, who was the first person with Down syndrome to finish an Ironman. And after seeing his story and seeing all the obstacles and challenges that he had overcome, it occurred to me that he probably has more challenges than I have, and if he can do that, then I can too. And that my story may have the power to inspire and educate others about Parkinson's. So I wrote Ironman and I told them my story. And this was January of 2023. And I didn't hear anything back for about 8 months. And so about a year ago, last week, so about a year, I got a phone call from Ironman offering me a slot to compete at the Ironman Hawaii World Championships, which at this point was only 9 weeks away. Fortunately, I had been continuing to ride and run a little bit, but I was in nowhere near good enough shape. But I realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that I was going to make the most of it. So I said yes. And I got to work training, and I decided that I wanted to use this platform to inspire and educate other people with Parkinson's, raise awareness to the importance of research, and also to raise awareness about how Parkinson's is affecting our veterans. And so I was able to share my story on the Today Show. Also, I ended up being the inspirational athlete for that year, for the 2023 Ironman documentary. They came to Cleveland and did a piece about In Motion, and we're able to share the amazing work that is being done here in the Cleveland area. And share some of the amazing stories from here as well. Sorry, I forgot that I have slides, but so here's a couple pictures. This is what I thought Parkinson's initially was. This is from the bike trial. We can skip that. So these are from some pictures from the Ironman races. And then this is the finish line at Ironman Hawaii. And it was everything that I hoped it would be. I was bawling my eyes out when I crossed the finish line. But to have my husband there and everything, it was incredibly meaningful for me to be able to share that journey. So since then, I've continued to give some talks about Parkinson's. I don't know what happened with my slides, but anyway, so I've continued to give some talks to hope to educate and inspire people with Parkinson's, and to give some tips and tools as to how to maintain an exercise program, because I think for most people, finding something that you're passionate about and that you like doing and that you can do for the rest of your life is really important. And so that's become one of my main talking points is educating others about Parkinson's disease. And so I've been giving some talks, and I recently I'm putting together a website with the goal of having a positive outlook on Parkinson's, because I noticed early on that the people who are doing well and living with this disease well 20 to 25 years later all have a couple things in common. They all have a positive attitude, they all think positively about their futures, and they all have a very good sense of humor about all the funny things and crazy things that we do with Parkinson's. And so I think it's really important for all of us to look at our futures in a positive way and set big goals. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jay Alberts, the man I credit for getting me back on the right track.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic meeting, and just very chance. We were just walking Giant Eagle, and you saw the loaded your shirt, and it was fantastic. Yeah. So, and as a Flatlander, Ohio guy, doing that race was a little bit challenging. Probably not as challenging as Ironman for sure. So I want to talk a little bit about some of our work and some of just a little history of exercise and how can we use exercise to slow Parkinson's. So I like history. This is Charcot. Charcot, considered the father of neurology. In early 1817, well, 1817 was the identification of Parkinson's, but in the late 1800s, Charcot noticed that people, when they would come to his office after a buggy ride on the cobble streets of London, that they felt better. And he said he thought that there was this jiggling that made them feel better. And so he developed this chair where you would basically sit in the chair and it would jiggle you about. And that was, at that time, kind of an exercise. Turns out it didn't really work, but it was a good, he was thinking of it. And then the other thing about it is, and this is where, we think we have these great innovative ideas, especially during COVID, we had telemedicine and home health and things like that. But he actually developed, in the lower right there, that was his home version that he would send home with people. They could wear it on their head and it would jiggle their head about. Again, didn't work, but at least he was a pretty innovative guy in terms of thinking of that. So then we'll skip a few years here for sure. 2003, 2008, there was a Cochrane review about exercise. And what they fundamentally found was that there was insufficient evidence to support that exercise did anything, slowed Parkinson's or had positive effects. And so part of that, was really based on the types of exercise people were doing at that time, right? Before 2003, if someone had said, oh, I'm going to do an Ironman or something like that, they would have said, oh my gosh, you should not do an Ironman. You might die. That was this concept. And I'll tell you that, when we submitted our first grant to do high intensity exercise, one of the reviews from the NIH panel was that we were being very irresponsible and that we might actually have PD patients die. Because in the past, people were looking at, if you want to exercise, do a chair-based exercise, sit in the chair. If you really want to be intense, maybe get some soup cans and move them about while you're in the chair. And so I think we've, obviously evolved or changed since then. And then in 2003, really discovered by accident, the benefits of riding a tandem bike with an individual with Parkinson's disease. And let's see, is there someone else? Can you play the video on the bottom right, or can I? Oh, there we go. Oh, fantastic. So this is an individual with deep brain stimulation. He's off DBS, and you can see he has a tremor, obviously. He's doing a little task there on a tablet device. And then we're going off on the tandem bike ride. And he's been off DBS for 4 hours, so post-exercise here. And you can see his movements are pretty good, and his tremor is gone. So it was at that point that I thought, there's something going on with high-intensity exercise. We don't need to have individuals in a chair to do exercise. They can perform a little bit more high-intensity exercise. And that led to us thinking about, well, what's going on with a tandem bike? So we looked in the animal literature, and we found that there's a mode of exercise called forced exercise. So if you look carefully on that upper left plot there, you'll see a rat on that little treadmill. And if you look carefully, there's some wires behind there. And so what happens is you make the rat Parkinsonian, you put it on the treadmill. Normally, if you put it on the treadmill, it'll just fall off because it's Parkinsonian. But what they did there is they have those wires, and so if it hits the wires, it gets a shock. And so that's what they called forced exercise. So they would force the animal to run at a faster rate than it would on its own. And so you think about a tandem bike. Now we've got Dave and Marilyn here who have ridden thousands of miles on a tandem bike, and they're still together. The challenge with riding a tandem bike is the front and the back person have to pedal at the same rate because they're connected by a chain, right? And so what we were doing, or what we thought we were doing with forced exercise when I was riding a tandem, was many of the patients would come in and they would pedal at 40 to 50 RPMs, but then I would pedal at 80 RPMs, so I was forcing them, without the electricity, to pedal at a higher rate. And so that led to some of our very early studies to show that actually forced exercise was beneficial for Parkinson's patients. So here was our very first study looking at forced versus voluntary, and we found after 8 weeks, so at the EOT, those people who were in the forced group, who were pedaling 80 to 90 RPMs with the help of the person on the front, actually showed about a 30% improvement in their symptoms. And so this was one of the early studies that utilized high intensity exercise and then actually showed that it improved function. And so we started to think about this, and certainly appreciate that tandem bikes are fantastic, but not really, feasible to put in everyone's home. So we developed a forced exercise bike, and we did a clinical trial looking at that with 100 patients. And in this one, what we found was, again, in the blue and the red there, both forced and voluntary, after 8 weeks, both groups actually improved. So what's happening here? It's not just forced exercise. What happens is, again, a lot has changed since that, 2003, when people weren't exercising at a high intensity. Now more people were actually able to exercise at a higher rate. And so what we found was that, so here we have MRI data when they're off medication, on medication, and then post-exercise without medication. And so what we found was the pattern of activity in the brain was actually very similar between when you give someone medication and after they do exercise. And when we looked at the data, there was a strong correlation or a strong relationship between the changes in brain function or activation patterns and pedaling rate. So there seems to be a relationship between how fast one is pedaling and the changes in brain function. So, as Sarah talked about, she was part of our phase 2 multi-site randomized trial where we had Peloton bikes in the home of patients for 1 year. And they exercised with a focus on high intensity exercise, really focusing on high cadence exercise. And so we had another group who was a usual and customary care group. And so as Dr. Walter said, exercise, before we thought there was disease arresting principles with Parkinson or with exercise. And in fact, these are brand new sort of data that we have now. And you can see in the black line, what you see here is baseline for the usual care group. They actually increased, as we would expect, about 4 points on their UPDRS scale, whereas the individuals in the exercise group actually had a slight decrease over 12 months of exercise. So these are some of the first data to show that exercise actually is slowing the progression of the disease. So the question now is, what is the prescription, right? Because we have to be able to empower you to actually do something that's helpful. So we did a classification analysis, and what we found, again, those patients who responded the best were actually pedaling between 75 and 80 RPMs over the entire course of the trial. So pedaling rate seems to be very important. The other important component is average watts, so the power. So again, you have to pedal at a relatively fast rate, and you're having to actually have some increase in your resistance over time. And then finally, not surprisingly, you actually have to be on the bike. So these are individuals who averaged between 3.5 and 4 times a week over the course of the trial. They had the best response, and this group here had the second most effective response, and they were between 3 and 3.5 times per week. So pedal fast and be on the bike. So now we're looking at another study, a phase 2 multi-site trial, looking at community-based exercise. I know there's some people from the YMCA who have programs here. Again, here we're trying to understand, does community-based exercise have the same effect, and what about the effect of genetics? So is there 2 people who can be doing the same exercise, but one responds well and one doesn't respond as well? So we're looking to understand what is the interplay between genetics and exercise. And that's an ongoing study. So if you're interested, definitely reach out. And finally, a very interesting study that I think we're doing is with deep brain stimulation and exercise with the Medtronic Percept system. We're actually recording from the brain while individuals are exercising to understand what's changing in the brain, in the subthalamic nucleus and the cortex over time. And so very excited about this, very excited about the enabling technology from Medtronic. So is exercise medicine? This type of exercise, yes. This type of exercise, not so much. This is my son. He's actually going to college next week. So, but anyway, thank you so much. And next I would like to introduce Kristine. Kristine is from Iowa. I'm originally from Iowa as well. And she wrote a book, and Dan Korkos and I helped write it, related to exercise and really embracing the concept of exercise. And I think the really neat thing about it is the cocktail approach to exercise. So, Kristine?
Thank you. Oh, yep, got it. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristine Meldrum. I am an exercise professional. I've worked over a decade with people with Parkinson's as well as other neurological diseases. And one of the driving factors for me in writing the book, Parkinson's, How to Reduce Symptoms Through Exercise, was one, witnessing the life-changing results that my clients had through exercise. And the other piece was there's always a lot of noise about exercise and a lot of information out there that is just simply not right. And it's confusing for everybody. And if the information is going to, if it doesn't help you with your symptoms, you're going to stop exercising, which is the worst thing that is possible for you. And so I'll give you my meeting Jay in the grocery store story. I didn't actually meet him in the grocery store. I actually had been implementing all that research. Oh, that's me. Okay. I had been implementing all his research into my cycling classes. And within a very short time, a year, my students were having life-changing results. I mean, their symptoms were getting so much better. And it was mind-boggling. And so my background outside of all of my exercise science and certifications in exercise is actually in journalism and marketing. And so I decided to bring those two worlds together, and I started writing Parkinson's exercise articles to start to educate people on what you need to do to exercise to help you with your Parkinson's. And who did I send those articles to? Dr. Alberts. And he actually wrote me back, and we started a dialogue because he was really interested in the fact that his research was doing all this wonderful, having all this wonderful effect for people actually out in the community. And one of the funny things he said to me was, you know, I do all this research, but it pretty much goes up on the shelf and gathers dust. He goes, but I'm like really thrilled the fact that it's actually having such an impact for people in the real world. And so we went a couple years, it's been several years, and I've been saying to Jay for years and years, we need to write a book. Another year, we need to write a book. And this went on, and he would nod his head at me. And so in 2022, I actually sent him drafts of the book. And he was kind of like, I guess we're writing a book. And so when the book I really wanted, it does three things. There's three components to the book. The first is it takes the science that Jay and so many other scientists have worked for 20 years to prove that exercise is a proven therapy for people with Parkinson's. And the one thing it does is it takes it and it explains it in such an easy way to understand. So that's part one. Part two is that it explains to the reader, how do you exercise? There are very specific things you have to do in order to help reduce symptoms and potentially slow progression of disease. And that is the piece that was missing in all the dialogue about exercise for Parkinson's. And so that is part of the cocktail that Jay talked about. So there's an exercise cocktail, and that's chapter 5 in the book. And it explains how everybody has to have a custom exercise cocktail plan, because you're all very unique with your symptoms, your progression of the disease, everything that's going on in your experience. And so you have to have this very tailored plan for you. And then there's the specifics on what exactly you have to do in order to help with symptoms. There's also different components on, have you worked out? When did you last work out? You know, do you have an aerobic base? And all of these things that have to be determined. So that's like the second component. The third component is that there's over 20 stories of people just like you, all right? People in different stages of the disease that are struggling, have gone through different things to overcome through exercise, and have had these incredible results through exercise. And they are so inspiring. And that is one thing. We have had such immense response to the book worldwide. And I mean, I had one woman wrote that she says, I'm not being overly dramatic when I say this book changed my life. And other people have said, it is about time that there is a book that actually explains what to do for exercise that makes sense and lays it out. So we've got so much response from people everywhere about the book. And the main thing is that everyone says it's so easy to read. It's very easy to read. And so the third part is that the 20 stories. There's 20 stories in this book, like I said, and 10 of the stories are from clients that I have worked with, and then the other 10 stories are case studies of individuals across the United States. And so you can, it's nice that you can see the difference of people that are, you know, at this point in the disease and they're struggling with this, or this person is this age and they're, you know, have this. So you can always go back. When you first read it, you know, it's not something you're dealing with, but later on you can go, oh, I want to go back and read, you know, that lifter story, because that applies to me now. So the book is a huge resource, as well as an inspiration. And and I'll tell you two quick stories. So one of the stories, Steve Gilbert had cancer. He got over his cancer at 59 to be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And so Steve Gilbert says that Parkinson's taught him that you don't have to be born an athlete to become one. He was never an athlete. He never did anything athletic in his life. And yet, when he got Parkinson's, he had to learn how to work out, because he wasn't going to let Parkinson's beat him. And so he started going to rock steady boxing. And he's been doing rock steady boxing for 16 years. And Steve Gilbert, in 2023, ran the Boston Marathon. Now, that's pretty amazing for someone who never did anything athletic in his entire life until he was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 59. And so there's all kinds of, like I said, stories like that. And I want to tell you another quick one about a woman that just came to my, she came to my brain and health class last week. Her husband came to talk to me after I was talking at a health conference, and he came and said, I really want you to talk to my wife. She has Parkinson's disease. He said, she has gone downhill so fast, and I'm really worried about her. And he said, we've moved out of our long-term home. She's depressed. he said, she's not doing well. And I said, well, can you bring her to my class on Thursday? And he said, okay, I'm gonna try to get her there. And I said, well, I tell you what, getting there is half the battle. So he brought her to class. He brought her in a wheelchair. And I helped her get out of the wheelchair. I moved her into the chair. And she was, she was very quiet. And she sat, I moved her into the chair, and she had very, very limited range of motion. And her name was Kay. And so I brought the cardio sticks out for the class. I was going to do some fun little, they're kind of like drumsticks. We were going to do some kind of fun little stuff with the sticks that day. And my class was a little crazy that day. They were just being really silly. And so I said, well, and the more I tried to get them to put their sticks away, the more they didn't want to put the sticks away. And so we just kind of went with it. And I said, fine, let's warm up with the sticks. And it actually turned out to be probably one of the most fun classes we ever had. And Kay just took this all in. You couldn't tell really what she was thinking, but she took it all in. And so I saw her husband the next day, and I said, Tom, how did Kay like the class? And he's like, she's like a new woman. He said, she is up in the kitchen, she's moving, I can't keep up with her. And I really didn't know if I could believe that or not. He said, she can't wait to come to class next week. And so she came to class. She came to class in a walker. And I'm like, where's the wheelchair? And she took the walker and she put it aside and she did a little ta-da, I'm here. And the woman said like no words the first time. And she sat, or she didn't sit, she stood the whole class and she danced. And this is the power of joy, okay? You never know what is going to happen if you try something. It wasn't so much even the exercise, I don't think. I mean, she did move, but not that much. But the experience of people, of joy, of just getting out of her rut that she was in. And she, all of a sudden, wanted to be in life again. And I think that exercise, no matter what you do, you have to start. And Kay started. It's a first step. Whatever the first step is for you is what you need. And you will find whatever that is. In the book, I talk about find what you love. Find what you love, because you'll do what you love. And try all kinds of different things until you find what you love. It absolutely changed her. We were all looking at each other like, who is this? We couldn't believe it. It was absolutely mind-boggling. But that is the power. Exercise offers possibilities that you don't think are even there. I mean, and you won't know it until you try it. So the thing I will say is this in closing. You just have to start. You're going to read these stories and you're going to go, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Well, you know what? They all started where you did. They all started thinking, I can't do that. I could never do that, or that's going to be so hard. But everybody starts taking a step, just like Kay, coming to a class in a wheelchair, or going to watch a class to see if they even want to try it, if that's what it is. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed for some people. That's the first step. You have to start somewhere, and then it's day by day by day by day, and then you look back and you're doing something like an Ironman or whatever that is for you. You find whatever that is. You'll see in the book that all these people have done something that they found for themselves. And you can find something for you too. And then you look back and you have something to work that will give you joy, that will make you push past the apathy that Parkinson's descends upon you. And then you'll really, when you start to feel what exercise can do for you, and you start to feel better, then you'll be motivated. But you have to get there first. So, and the person who can tell you all about that from a person who actually has Parkinson's is our next speaker, Jimmy Choi. And if you don't know who this man is, he is a 3-time America Ninja Warrior. 4-time? 5? Oh boy, I missed a couple. I mean, this man, and I'm going to tell you, he actually worked with Daniel Corcus, who is the other contributor on the book. And 5 times. Oh, you did 3 times solo?
No.
5 times. Okay, he's going to correct me. He'll get the record straight. Anyway, he is incredible. And I'm going to tell you all to go get on his Facebook, because it's really fun to watch what he does on his Instagram and Facebook page. He's always doing crazy stuff that'll help you, motivate you. He's just a fun guy, and you would never know this guy has Parkinson's because he's incredible. So.
You know, I can stand up here and talk about exercise all day long, but before I do that, I want to say that I'm the only person up here without a PhD or an MD or some kind of initials behind my name. So I'm really the dumb jock in the room here. Okay. But you know what? Before we get back into exercise, I just want to tell you guys a real quick story. This was before I became who I am, what you guys see, and you guys might look at me and say, "Oh, he's fit." But I just want everybody to know that before that, in 2008 and 2009, right around that time, I was actually walking with a cane because I couldn't stay balanced. I would fall over all the time. And I weighed about 250 to 260 pounds. So just to reinforce the idea that you don't have to start athletic to be in exercise, I just want to reinforce that. But a story I want to tell you is actually this. In 2006 and 2007, I was in Las Vegas, and I was playing poker. How many of you guys play poker and know the game? Okay, a handful of you, good. So when you play poker, there's 2 advantages that if you read any poker book, they say there's 2 advantages that you can have. And now, number 1 is a poker face, right? Stone face, no emotions. That is one advantage. The second advantage that you have is adrenaline. Okay, they call these things tells. So when someone has a really strong hand, you have a lot of adrenaline going through your body. And when you have a lot of adrenaline going through your body, what happens to your hands? They tremor and they shake, right? So here I am sitting in Las Vegas, and I'm playing poker. And I get into this big hand with someone. We're playing cash games. And we get into this big hand, and I had nothing. I had just crap hand, okay? And I'm betting into this guy, and I'm bluffing the entire way. And the hand goes on. We get to the end, the very last move. After the river is the very last card that turns over, and now the hand is over. It's basically who has the better hand will win. So now the action's on me, which means I make the move. I just shove all my chips in, okay? $17,000 in the pot. So it's not small money. $17,000 in the pot. I shoved it all in. The guy's thinking, what should I do? What should I do? Should he make the call or not? But anyways, he looks at me, he goes, I've been watching you all day, and you have expressed 0 expression. And then when I shoved those chips in, he goes, when you shoved those chips in, I noticed that you were shaking a lot. So to him, that's a sign of strength. I have no emotion, and I have adrenaline going, and that's a sign of strength. And he tossed away his cards. I took down the entire pot, right? And the entire time I'm thinking, you know what? Life dealt me a crappy hand in Parkinson's, but that doesn't mean I can't win, right? So, thank you. My point of that story is that living with Parkinson's is, a lot of it is about what you guys have learned today: medication, treatments, dance, financial planning and exercise. Living with Parkinson's is a lot about all of that. But none of that matters if you don't have the mindset to go with it, okay? So when I realized that you can have a crappy hand dealt to you and still do well, right? When you take that mentality into everything that you do, everything can be more positive in that light, okay? So I'm gonna bring it back to exercise now. I'm gonna go through some of my stats, and then I know I'm the last speaker that you guys have to listen to today, I think. So I'm gonna send you guys away with my stats. I am a 5-time American Ninja Warrior. I have completed an ultra marathon, 16 marathons, 105 half marathons. I have 3 fitness Guinness World Records. 1 for burpees, everybody's favorite, right? And 2 for push-ups. Now, I want to let you guys, I did all of that after I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. None of that was before, okay? So how can I do that? Well, once again, it is the mindset. This is my Dr. Albert's moment. I had no idea until you went through your timeline. In 2009, I started to do a lot of clinical trials, and I enrolled in a forced exercise study. I had no idea that you were behind it, or it may not be connected, but I was strapped into one of those bikes, and I was forced to exercise. And after a session, I felt like, you know what? I feel a lot better after these sessions. But I took that, and I went home, and I started exercising on my own, step by step. Every day, I try to do a little bit more, okay? So that was my mindset. And I'm going to fast forward all of that good stuff in between the American Ninja Warrior. I'm going to fast forward all that, and I'm going to get to a time in our life where none of us really enjoyed, is during the COVID pandemic. Gyms shut down. Doctors' offices closed. I had no access to anything, right? So what did I do? I noticed I was falling a lot, okay? I noticed I was falling a lot, so I was thinking to myself, what can I do from a fitness perspective that's going to help me with my falls? Now, if you guys think about it, a burpee, for those of you who don't know what a burpee is, I'm going to do a quick demonstration right here. This is a burpee. And right back up, okay? So if I'm falling a lot, if I can train myself to fall safely and build enough strength to get up every time, I'm going to be less scared of taking a fall. So I started doing those 5 at a time, 5 a day, 10 a day, 15 a day. And then during the pandemic, when everything shut down, I started doing a lot of it. That was my main source of exercise, was getting up and down. So what started out as a desire to learn a self-saving skill, I did so much of it that I got really good at it, and it gave me the opportunity to break a Guinness World Record. And in August of 2020, I did just that. I did 27 hand-release burpees 30 hand-release burpees in 1 minute, breaking the previous record of 27. So I wanted to let you guys know that, because none of that would have happened if I didn't have a mindset shift that go along with the exercise and all this knowledge behind it. So I really want to thank you guys for being here all day and listening to us tell our stories up here. But at the end of the day, when you guys leave, just think, it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing in your life with Parkinson's, the best advocate that you can have for yourself is you. So look in the mirror, ask yourself, how do I want to live with this disease? Live well? It's up to you. Thank you guys very much for your time.
All right. Who here is ready to take control of Parkinson's disease now? Are you all in? Great. Anybody feeling lucky? Good, well, we've got a raffle.
Are we playing poker?
Did we do the tickets yet? Oh, does anybody need a ticket? There's some people that need tickets. So let's get some of the extra tickets out, and we'll do the raffle. And we have some time for Q&A too, I think. 5? Yeah, put your hands up if you need a ticket if you didn't get one.
And dance if you have a question.
Yeah, you got to do something else if you have a question. There's a question back here. Actually, why don't we get a mic out? Take one mic. Share.
Everybody's got their hands up for a raffle ticket. Who has a question? Can you stand up? Perfect.
Hi, some of these slides had some very valuable information on them. Are they going to be available somewhere? Are they going to be posted somewhere?
Yeah, so all the presentations will be available with the slide content afterwards. We actually, if you look, last year's Empower You is up on the Cleveland Clinic website, and we'll have this year up there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, and then there's another question up here too. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, hi. So far, the exercises that have been talked about have been primarily biking and running, a few other things. I want to know about swimming and weight training, because I primarily swim. And also, part of that question is, if you're weight training, it's not like something that's going to be real aerobic. And so is something like that helpful? And also, my main concern is swimming, because I swim.
Very good questions, and that's my favorite sport too. Sarah, maybe you could say something about swimming, and Jay or Jimmy or anybody else about the rest of it.
Yeah, so actually the Parkinson's Foundation has a great brochure that shows 4 different types of exercise that we should be doing, and strength training is a very important component of that. And you still get some cardiovascular workout doing the strength training. Swimming is fantastic. I swim a lot because of triathlon training, and not even only swimming, but water aerobics, deep water walking or running. For a lot of people have knee problems and joint problems. And for me, practicing the big arm movements and the water walking, like with my hands at varied degrees, it really helps me with my arm swing. So when I'm at the pool swimming, sometimes I'll finish up with a couple of laps just walking back and forth in the deep water, just moving my arms with the big movements. And I've noticed that helps a lot too. So, I think it's important, like everybody's pointed out here, is just to have a variety of different exercises you like to do. It keeps it more interesting. You're less likely to get injured if you're doing different types of things, and to keep it fun.
So there's a whole chapter on resistance training in the book with the research behind it. You do get your heart rate up if you are working out while you're doing resistance training. When I work out with my clients, we go usually from their aerobic into weight training, and they keep their heart rates up just as high as when they were doing their cardio. The other component about resistance training that a lot of people don't understand or know is that resistance training actually improves your cognitive function. And in particular, there's information about doing instability work, which is a balance work with your resistance training, and that does fantastic cognitive training for you. So yeah, there's a whole chapter on that with the science in the book on that.
Yeah, the only reason I would just note that you don't see papers and studies on those types. You usually see it on treadmill and bikes, because as scientists, we can't control. It'd be very hard for us to do a clinical trial with swimming. One, the facilities and the IRB and everything else. So we tend to study exercises that we can observe and control very well. So, but it doesn't mean other types of those exercises, aerobic exercise, isn't as good.
I'm just going to add one comment. So we explain in the book the difference between what we kind of call sports activities. That's kind of the boxing and all those things. And that goes to what Jay was explaining. Science-proven exercise is exercise that has been studied with many millions of dollars of research behind it, and so everything else is kind of grouped in that sports exercise. It just doesn't have all that funded science research behind it. It's not that they aren't as good. they may have some science, and you'll read, like Rock Steady Boxing, there's a chapter on Rock Steady Boxing. It has quite a bit of science, just not as much as what we call science proven. The treadmill, cycling, and the strength training. Those are the 3 science proven studies.
Who's got another question? Over here. Oh, there and there.
What about the use of saunas or a hot tub?
Sauna or hot tub?
That would be classified in what you love of the cocktail plan.
Okay, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Thank you all. Sarah, this is a question I asked you last week, but it may be for everybody as well. Talk about timing of medicine for those that do take medicine relative to exercise or competitions and such.
Jimmy.
So I've been taking medicine for 20 years. Since when I was diagnosed, I started taking medication right away. And I've learned a lot along the way. And what I realized is that what you eat, what you're doing, your activities, will all have an impact on how well your medication is working for you, okay, and how much you need. So, for example, I started keeping a log many years ago. Actually, it was like 2012 I started keeping this log. I kept a log of my medication when I was taking it, what I was eating, and what activity I was doing when I was doing it. And then I would come back 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and put the same amount of data into like how I was feeling after so many minutes after medication. And after about 8 to 12 months and more of this data, it started to show me where my peaks and my on and off times were. And certain things started popping up about what's affecting. Like, for example, we know today that protein slows absorption of medication. I didn't know that in 2012, right? But I noticed that back then. So I would change the way that I eat and change my activity. I also know from that data, and this is just me personally, it could be different for everybody else, and it probably will be, is that when I do run, I need more carbidopa, levodopa than I do when I'm sitting around. And then so I need the most when I'm running. I need a little bit less, but more than average, more than normal actually, when I'm cycling and when I'm strength training. They're all different amounts by very slight margins. So today, after 20 years of taking medication, having all this data, I'm able to have a schedule that works for me, and I know based on what activity I'm doing today, how much medication I should be taking today. So the question people ask me is, how much medicine are you taking today? It's a range. It's not just 12 pills a day. It's actually a range anywhere between 8 to 12 on any given day, depending on my activity.
So in endurance racing too, it's been kind of a guessing game for me too, trying to sort it out. And I've noticed that like Jimmy was saying, when I'm doing a lot of cycling or running, I do take extra medication. At Ironman, I noticed partway into the bike, I had a hard time getting my cadence or my bike rate above 60 to 65 when I was trying to keep it 80 to 90. And it wasn't until I stopped and took more medication that I was able to start getting my cadence up higher. So just a lot of it's trial and error. I forgot to mention the name of the website I'm working on, but it has a lot of this anecdotal information, trying to share information between patients of things that aren't necessarily studied, but all of us have learned along the way to share. So it's Parkinson's with a Z, so Parkinson, but instead of an S at the end, it has a Z.org. And then basically, I just want to try to bring people together to share some of this wisdom that we've all learned along the way to help each other, because a lot of it hasn't been studied. And so I'm hoping that by getting this information together, it can maybe give the researchers some ideas of things that we found helpful that maybe that they haven't thought to study, and that we can help each other. So it's Parkinsons.org with a Z.
So I think it's Tish, right? Is it Tish? I think she's been trying to ask a question for a while now, so let's get her in.
Yep.
Okay, this will be the last question.
I'm wondering about a treadmill on incline. Like if there's a range you need to be, like 70 to 75, 80 to 85 for a pulse rate.
So when I work with my clients, it's very dependent on the person And with treadmill training, most of the time it is a person that is stage 1 or does not have any balance issues, any problem with their gait. If anyone has any problems with gaits, they would be working with a physical therapist on the treadmill. So if you're going to be training for exercise purposes, it's someone who has absolutely no gait problems. And then it depends on if you're going to go with the Sparks methodology training. That methodology is you just determine through speed or incline to go to your heart rate. And that's a whole nother, I can talk to you about that separately if you want. Because that's kind of getting in the weeds. But it's in the book. Okay.
All right, are we ready for the raffle? Got some numbers coming up.
Okay, we have ticket number 102022. 102022.
Hey, congratulations. Nice.
Can you carry that?
Oh, it's bigger than you.
I might have to help you.
You got it?
Landing.
Okay.
Maybe down the steps.
He's got it. He's got it.
Nice.
Oh,
That-
Way to take a challenge.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that concludes our session. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'll be around for questions if anybody has questions afterwards, and I'm sure some of our panelists will be around for a little bit. But hopefully this was engaging. You found ways to empower yourself to take control of Parkinson's and learn about exercise, wellness, medications, and all the different things that can help you live a healthy and happy life as best as possible. Thank you.